For years, Judge Serafina Varn ruled her courtroom with an iron fist, silencing attorneys, twisting the law, and condemning innocent men to prison. But today, one man is about to change everything. For attorney Cashin Holt, this isn't just another case. It's personal. He's spent years gathering evidence, waiting for the perfect moment to expose her corruption. Taking down a judge this powerful could cost him everything. If he fails, will justice ever stand a chance? Step inside the courtroom and witness a battle that could change everything. In the courthouse of Willow Creek, Alabama, the heat outside was suffocating, but inside courtroom 3, the air was heavier still. Not from the weather, but from an unspoken oppression that clung to the walls. Murmurs faded, papers stilled, and everyone settled into place, not out of comfort, but out of understanding. In this courtroom, the outcome was never in doubt. At the center sat Judge Serafina Varn, perched on the bench, not just above the courtroom but above justice itself. Her glasses rested low on her nose, her sharp, calculating gaze surveying her domain. Her silver hair was pulled into a tight bun, not a strand out of place, like her power, undisturbed, absolute. For years, Varn had presided over this court, deciding fates with unrelenting control. She rarely raised her voice. A sigh, a raised eyebrow, or the slow click of her gavel was enough to remind everyone who held the power. In this courtroom, the rules were clear. If the defendant was black, he had already lost. If his lawyer was black, his arguments were wasted breath. And if anyone dared challenge the system, they didn't last long. It wasn't just bias, it was darker, entrenched. A young public defender once protested a verdict. He lost his license months later. A fellow judge questioned one of Varn's rulings. He resigned soon after. No one won against Serafina Varn. No one tried anymore. But today someone was about to. Footsteps echoed across the marble floor. Steady, deliberate. Cashin Holt wasn't like the others who had entered this room. He didn't avoid her gaze, didn't fidget or shift uncomfortably. He wasn't here to play Varn's game. Today, Cashin wasn't just defending his client. He was here to bring Serafina Varn down. The sharp click of his polished shoes cut through the silence of courtroom 3. Cashin walked with quiet confidence, his dark suit crisp, shoulders squared, gaze steady. This wasn't just another case. He had stood in courtrooms like this before, where justice was a formality, verdicts decided long before anyone stepped inside. But today was different. Today, he was here to dismantle a legacy of corruption. As he stepped forward, eyes shifted toward him. Some curious, some wary, some already dismissing him. He felt the tension, the unspoken truth that ruled this courtroom. Men like him weren't supposed to win here. Varn's gaze flickered toward him, sharp, assessing. She'd heard of him, a troublemaker, a nuisance, the kind of lawyer who fought the system itself. Her expression didn't change, but the air between them shifted, a silent battle line drawn. Seated at the defense table, shoulders hunched, Gideon Wells looked like a man already condemned. Not by guilt, but by a system never designed to see him as anything else. The borrowed suit was too big, cuffs frayed, but it didn't matter. To Varn, he was just another black man in chains. The evidence against him was flimsy. A grainy video showing a man in a hoodie, no clear face, no identifying features. An eyewitness, an older white store clerk, who hesitated when making his statement. A weapon found miles away, no fingerprints, no tie to Gideon. In Varn's courtroom, facts mattered less than perception. A black man, a robbery, a case that should have been dismissed before trial. Yet here he was. Gideon's eyes flickered toward Cashin, searching for hope, a lifeline. Cashin met his gaze, steady, unwavering, a silent promise passing between them. Not today. Today, Cashin wasn't just arguing a case. He was ensuring the truth mattered. The trial had barely begun, and the game was rigged. Cashin stood at the defense table, his voice firm. Your Honor, the prosecution introduced evidence never disclosed in discovery. A clear violation of Brady versus Maryland. Varn didn't blink. Denied, she said, no deliberation, no pretense of fairness. Cashin held his ground. With all due respect, this is a fundamental violation. Varn exhaled sharply, annoyance barely masked. Mr. Holt, if you want a grandstand, do it elsewhere. This court has no time for theatrics. Cashin clenched his jaw. Theatrics, that's what she called due process. Across the room, Nolan Bryce, the young prosecutor, sat stiffly. Fresh out of law school, he didn't need to be good, just follow Varn's lead. She guided him like a puppeteer, smoothing his fumbles, turning missteps into advantages. Mr. Bryce, she said, voice softer, almost maternal. Let's move on. We wouldn't want to waste the jury's time. Bryce nodded, confidence seeping in. The judge was on his side, she always was. In the jury box, a few members shifted uncomfortably. They weren't blind. Even those expecting Gideon's guilt saw what was happening. In the gallery, reporters' pens scratched faster. They felt it, the shift, the discomfort, the undeniable truth that this wasn't just bias, but something worse. No one spoke. In this courtroom, silence was survival. Cashin knew this, but today he wouldn't stay silent. The courtroom felt different now, the shift subtle but undeniable. Cashin knew how to read a room. He'd spent years in places like this, where walls held unspoken rules, silent threats, expectations set before the trial began. But today he was here to break them. He turned toward the witness stand, steps measured, every move calculated. Seated was Edgar Thurston, the prosecution's star witness, a man in his late 60s, thin, with nervous hands. Cashin let the silence stretch, watching the weight settle on Thurston's shoulders. The jury watched, reporters scribbled, and Varn remained unreadable, though her fingers curled slightly against the bench. Mr. Thurston, Cashin said smoothly, you testified under oath that you saw my client, Gideon Wells, at the robbery scene. That's correct. Thurston cleared his throat. Yes, sir. Cashin tilted his head. You're sure? A flicker of hesitation. I mean, I saw someone who looked like him. There it was. Cashin let the words hang, turning to the jury. You think you saw him? He repeated softly. That's not the same as knowing, is it? Thurston's fingers twitched. I mean, it was dark. But Cashin cut in, flipping open a file. In your original statement to the police, you said, I didn't get a good look at him. It was dark. I only saw him for a second. Silence. In the jury box, heads turned, glances exchanged. In that statement, you weren't sure at all, were you, Mr. Thurston? The old man shifted. I just remembered more later. Cashin leaned in, eyes locked. Did you remember? Or did someone help you remember? Thurston swallowed hard. The tension tightened. Cashin walked back to the defense table, reaching into his briefcase, letting anticipation build. Your Honor, he said, voice sharper. The defense has obtained evidence that calls this entire case into question. Varn stiffened. Cashin placed surveillance stills on the evidence screen. This footage, from a different angle than the prosecution's, shows the suspect is at least 2 inches shorter than my client. Whispers swept the courtroom. Cashin reached for a financial report. And here is proof that Mr. Thurston received a $5,000 deposit days after identifying my client. A reporter gasped. A juror exhaled. Even Bryce looked rattled, flipping through notes. Cashin turned to the witness. Mr. Thurston, do you still stand by your testimony? Thurston's face paled, lips parted, but no words came. The truth had spoken louder than he could. For the first time, Judge Serafina Varn was no longer in control, and she felt it. Jurors shifted, reporters' pens raced, and Bryce sat frozen, gripping his notes. The weight of truth settled, and Varn hated it. Her fingers tightened, lips pressed thin. Enough, she snapped, voice sharp but weaker than before. She turned to Cashin, her mask cracking. You think you're clever, Mr. Holt? She spat, formalities slipping. Parading around like some hero. You're nothing but a cheap lawyer with a flair for theatrics. Cashin didn't flinch. He adjusted his tie, slow, deliberate, and stepped forward. And you, Your Honor, he said smoothly, are dangerously close to proving everything I've said about you. Whispers spread. Varn's expression darkened. She wasn't used to being challenged. "You're testing my patience, Mr. Holt," she warned, voice venomous. "One more outburst, and I'll hold you in contempt." Cashin tilted his head, feigning curiosity. For what exactly? Asking this court to follow the law. A murmur from the jury, a stifled chuckle from the gallery. Varn's grip tightened on her gavel. She was losing them, her absolute control slipping. "You are out of line," she snapped, slamming her gavel. Cashin didn't raise his voice, but stepped closer, voice calm, cutting. "No, Your Honor. For the first time in this courtroom, you are." The silence was explosive. Varn sat rigid, face tight with rage. She had lost control, and she knew it. But Cashin wasn't finished. He reached into his briefcase, the tension stretching like a taut wire. "Your Honor," he said, voice dangerously calm, "since we're discussing facts, I'd like to submit one final piece of evidence." The jury leaned in. Reporters lifted pens. Even Bryce sat frozen, glancing at Varn. Cashin placed a sealed manila envelope on the table, fingers resting lightly, letting the moment breathe. "This," he said, looking at Varn, "is something the court will find illuminating." A muscle twitched in Varn's jaw. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Holt," she said, voice less steady. Cashin lifted a brow. "No, Your Honor," he replied, tapping the envelope. "I'm playing to win." With slow precision, he broke the seal. The truth was about to break the courtroom wide open. Varn sat high, gavel gripped tightly. She had lost ground, but not the war, not yet. She could feel the eyes pressing against her. Jury, reporters, even Bryce. Questioning, second-guessing. It didn't matter. She was still the judge. She could bury this case, silence Cashin, remind everyone who ruled. She opened her mouth to dismiss his evidence, to shut him down. Then the doors burst open, a heavy thud against the walls. Gasps, chairs scraping, whispers tightening into a hush. Every head turned. Framed in the doorway were two men. Dark suits, cold expressions, federal badges gleaming. The air of Varn's authority collapsed. She felt it, a crack in her control. "This is a courtroom," she snapped, voice harsher than intended. "I don't know what you think you're doing here." One agent stepped forward, pulling a folded paper from his jacket. "Judge Serafina Varn," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "We need to speak with you immediately." The room held its breath. For years, Varn had ruled with absolute authority. Even now, with federal agents before her, she refused to believe it was over. "You're in the middle of a trial," she snapped. "This is a courtroom, not a circus. Whatever this is, it can wait." The lead agent didn't hesitate. "No, Judge Varn, this can't wait." The tension coiled tighter. This wasn't just about Gideon Wells anymore. The agent unfolded the document, voice cutting like a blade. "Serafina Varn, you are under federal investigation for bribery, obstruction of justice, and repeated violations of civil rights law." Gasps spread. Varn's lips parted, but no words came. The agent continued. "For decades, you've presided over cases where defendants, primarily black men, were denied due process. You've accepted financial incentives for predetermined rulings. You've manipulated sentencing to benefit private interests." The reaction wasn't just shock. It was recognition. The lawyers who'd lost cases before stepping inside, the defendants whose futures were signed away, the jurors who'd felt invisible pressure, they'd known. They just never thought they'd see this day. Varn let out a sharp breath, her composure cracking. "This is absurd," she snapped, voice lacking its former authority. "A baseless, politically motivated attack on my reputation." "Your reputation?" The words came from Cashin, smooth, unwavering. She turned sharply toward him, and for the first time, something like fear flickered in her eyes. Cashin stood tall, no longer just a defense attorney but a man who'd seen the system fail too many times. He stepped forward. "Tell me, Judge Varn," he said, voice edged with steel, "how many innocent men sat in his chair," he gestured to Gideon, "and never got the chance to defend their reputation?" Silence. Varn's breath shallowed, pulse hammering. This wasn't just an accusation, one case, one moment. This was everything. The years of power wielded like a weapon, lives dismantled without a thought, rulings made not for justice but for power. For the first time, she wasn't passing judgment. She was on trial. Varn stood behind the bench, fingers gripping the gavel, feeling something she hadn't felt in decades. Fear. It started small but was now spreading, threatening to consume everything. Her breath sharpened, voice rising. "This is an outrage," she snapped, edged with panic. She stood, the gavel slipping, clattering loudly. "A disgraceful, orchestrated attempt to tarnish my name. I have upheld the law with integrity for years. You," she gestured at the agents, "have no authority over me." The agents remained unshaken. Her words, once enough to make attorneys shrink, fell flat. Murmurs grew louder in the gallery. Jurors exchanged glances, some leaning forward, seeing her for what she was. Her heart pounded. She had to regain control. She reached for her phone, fingers trembling, scrolling to a contact that once guaranteed protection. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. No answer. She pressed again. Voicemail. Her stomach twisted. No one was coming. The protection she'd relied on, the power she'd wielded, it was gone. The phone fell clattering. One last move. She turned to the courtroom officers, who'd enforced her rulings for years. "Stop them," she ordered. No one moved. Disbelief crossed her face. "That's an order." Still nothing. She searched their faces, expecting loyalty, fear. Instead, she found indifference. The men who'd once enforced her will now refuse to meet her eyes. Varn's chest rose in shallow breaths, hands trembling, vision blurring. She opened her mouth for one last attempt to command control. It was over. For the first time, she wasn't giving the verdict. The courtroom stood frozen. Serafina Varn, who'd controlled this space for years, was motionless, her commanding presence a shadow. Her breath came in sharp pulls. The lead agent stepped forward, unfolding a document, voice cold with authority. "Serafina Varn, you are under arrest for multiple counts of bribery, obstruction of justice, and willful violations of civil rights under federal law." The words struck like a hammer. A gasp rippled through the gallery. Jurors shifted uneasily. Varn didn't move. "For decades," the agent continued, "you knowingly abused your position to deny defendants a fair trial. You manipulated evidence, accepted financial compensation for predetermined rulings, sentenced innocent men, many people of color, without due process." Her lips parted, but there were no words, no power left. The agent nodded. Handcuffs snapped shut, the metallic sound cutting through the courtroom, final as a bell marking the end of an era. Varn flinched, body tensing as if to resist, but her shoulders sagged, chin dropped. She bowed her head. She'd spent years judging others with cold indifference. Now her fate was sealed. The agents guided her down the steps, past the jury, the gallery, the people who'd once feared her. They only watched. No one stood, no one spoke. For the first time, Serafina Varn was truly alone. As the courtroom door swung open, the last thing she heard was the sound of justice. Relentless, inescapable. The courtroom remained still, the weight of what happened too heavy to process. Then it cracked. A sharp exhale, a whisper, then murmurs. The room came alive. Tears welled in the eyes of those who'd lost hope. A woman whose son was sentenced unfairly covered her mouth with trembling hands. A man, once wrongfully accused in this very chair, let out a shuddering breath, as if released from a sentence that never truly ended. For the first time in years, the courtroom felt lighter. Justice had won. But Cashin wasn't done. As relief mixed with disbelief, he turned to the prosecution's table, to Nolan Bryce. The young prosecutor sat paralyzed, gripping his notes, face pale. For years, he'd been Varn's loyal soldier, never questioning fairness. Now he was just a man without a shield, no guidance, no assurances. Just him, just the law, and the law wasn't on his side. "Mr. Bryce," Cashin said, voice firm, The judge presiding over this case has been arrested for corruption. The system she upheld, the foundation of this trial, has been exposed. Bryce swallowed, saying nothing. Cashin stepped forward. Given the overwhelming evidence of misconduct, I move for an immediate dismissal of all charges against my client, Gideon Wells. Silence. All eyes turned to Bryce. He blinked, looking at his notes, but there was nothing left to argue. The new judge, known for fairness, sat in silence, gaze sharp. He nodded. The motion to dismiss is granted, he said, voice firm. All charges against Gideon Wells are dropped. Remove his restraints. A collective exhale swept the room. Gideon froze as the officer stepped forward. For a moment he didn't move, as if his body forgot freedom. Then the handcuffs clicked open, falling away. For the first time in years, his hands were his own. He flexed his fingers, staring, convincing himself it was real. His shoulders shook, not with fear or anger, but relief. The courthouse doors swung open, and Gideon Wells walked out a free man. He stepped onto the steps, squinting against the sunlight, breath-catching. It was brighter than he remembered. For years, the only sky he'd seen was through metal bars, fractured. Now it stretched endlessly open, unchained. A slow smile tugged at his lips as he lifted his face to the sun, its warmth sinking into his skin. Behind him, Cashin stood at the doorway, watching. He'd won this fight, but beyond Gideon, beyond the celebration, he knew the war wasn't over. There were more Varns, more Gideons, more battles. As he stepped forward, determination burned in his eyes, bright as the sun overhead. This was just the beginning.